Good evening, and I want to say thank you to the Women's Bar Association for putting together this panel. It is a pleasure to be here with all of my fellow panel members and with all of you. I have to take a quick moment to just say thank you to a couple people who are here. Former law clerk Elizabeth Marvin, who is active with the Women's Bar Association, and my two current law clerks, Shannon Stokes, who will be coming to Kirkland and Ellis when she completes her clerkship, and Kevin Blair, who left Squire Saunders to clerk for a year and will be returning to Squire Saunders. So I guess the first question, or the first part of the answer, I'm working in reverse, is why become a judge? And I love being a judge. I'll start there. I didn't start out thinking I wanted to be a judge. I started out wanting to go to law school, wanting to become a lawyer, and a lot of my influences were my family. My parents were always very active in the community. My mother is a retired judge who went back to law school when I was in high school, and so the opportunity to watch her go through the process and watch her use her law degree in many different aspects was exciting to me. I went to Howard University Law School after finishing at Duke University, and I always had a deep commitment to equal justice, and I think that's sort of been a driving force throughout my different areas of practice. Right after law school, I went to Hogan and Hartson, where I was a litigation associate, and then went to the District of Columbia government, where I had the pleasure of serving in what is now called the D.C. Attorney General's office under the Corporation Counsel, who was John Payton at that time, and who was still a mentor and a friend. It was at that point, while I was at the Office of Corporation Counsel, my last responsibility was the head of one of the divisions, the Family Services Division that prosecutes child abuse and neglect, child support and domestic violence cases. It was at that point that I began to think about what it might be like to be a magistrate judge. And that process is a little different than the process to become an associate judge and an appellate judge. And I know you'll be hearing a lot about the processes from Magistrate Judge Brenneman, but that is a 4-year appointment by the chief judge. And once I began working as a magistrate judge, I realized how much I loved the role of a decision maker, which is very different from the role of a litigator. So I think you have to ask yourself, is this what I want to do? And you do feel the press of humanity. You see every cross-section of the population of the District of Columbia, and that's what I love about it. I truly feel like it's public service. And having had the experience of all different levels of our courts, our local court system, as magistrate judge, trial court, and now on the Court of Appeals, I can say that each step has informed and added interesting perspective to my role and responsibility as an appellate judge. Different. As a trial judge, you are on the bench most of the time. You are reacting to the situations. You see cases litigated by large firm lawyers and pro se litigants. And it's a very different dynamic. You have juries and bench trials. As an appellate judge, much more of our time is spent in chambers, reviewing the record of trial, preparing for oral arguments, and crafting our decisions. But it is more reflective in many ways. So I have enjoyed all of those steps. I just want to take a quick moment to say that involvement and work with the Women's Bar Association and other organizations, the mandatory bars as well as the voluntary bars, has been critical at each stage, I think, of my professional development. And as an associate, many of you are associates at firms, you feel like you couldn't possibly leave to attend an event at 6 o'clock because the billable hours are running. And it's not that you have to do it every week, but it's important to your professional development to interact with other people in the profession. And it's through those interactions that you see your value, I think, as an attorney, that you get into the community and are able to give back through the many service projects, and that you meet people who become friends and colleagues, whether they're your co-counsel or your opposing counsel. And that's been vital every step of the way. The last point I wanted to make before you move on is that during each of the processes of becoming a magistrate judge, a superior court judge, and an appellate court judge, the work that I did with different bar associations became critical. The Women's Bar Association, I'm proud to say, supported my candidacy each time, and that meant a lot. The Asian Pacific Bar Association, the Washington Bar Association, the Hispanic Bar Association, reaching out to lawyers that I already knew. And I stress that I didn't wake up one morning and call people on the phone and say, oh, you can do that, I'm sure. But it helps that they know you, they've worked with you on different projects, and they know that you have been involved and committed to our community here in the District of Columbia. I continue to stress that as busy as you get, it's important to reach out and reach back. And I have had the pleasure of being mentored by wonderful people, many of whom are sitting right here at this table, I'm proud to say, as I look up and down both sides of the table. But it's also important, wherever you are, to mentor someone else and to try to bring someone else along. And I try to continue to do that with my law clerks and by making internships available for law students and college students in my chambers. And I've done that wherever I've been since I left law school. So with that, I will say that diversity is important on the bench, all of our benches, particularly as an appellate court, because you're making decisions collegially. And that was probably the hardest transition. As a trial judge, if I wrote an order, I sent it out, it was done. And the first time I tried that as an appellate judge, that didn't go over well with my colleagues. So it's a collegial process, and that makes our decisions, I think, stronger and more legally sound. But it relies on different life experiences that the 9 judges on our court bring to the bench. So with that, I will await any questions, and I will say that pick up the phone and call. People call all the time. I know I've called many of the people at this table when you have a question, when you're trying to make decisions about next steps in your career. Thank you.
Judge Howell?
Huvelle.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. In some sense, my career path has not been typical of many of the people who are on the bench, both here in the federal court as well as in the local courts. I have been on both the Superior Court and the Federal District Court now for almost 20 years. I clerked in Massachusetts. I come from Massachusetts. Oops, I should turn this on. Sorry, my mistake. Excuse me. Is that working? Okay. Yes. You're here all right? Yes. I'm sorry. I come from Massachusetts. I clerked there. I went to Boston College Law School. I moved here in the mid-'70s expecting to return to Massachusetts. I come from a family that included lawyers. My husband's a lawyer, and we thought we'd try Washington to see what it's like because the economy in Massachusetts at the time was fairly bleak. I had never worked in a law firm in my life. And I sent out a couple of resumes after my husband took a job and left Massachusetts about a year before I did, and he came to Covington and Burling, and I decided I was going to find a job down here, and I actually was very interested in the public defender or the U.S. attorneys, but they never wrote back because they're on a different time frame as far as I had been a public defender one summer. I'd worked in a DA's office. Another summer, I had never worked in a law firm. I got a job at Williams & Connolly, and I must say that the stars were sort of well aligned, and I was very